Webinar, Legal Sales and Service Organization 12th Annual Raindance Conference, a recap. And that's what we're talking about today. But really, after last week and after two conferences that were back-to-back, what this webinar really should be entitled is From Turmoil to Transformation. And the reason I say that is because last week there were two conferences related to legal marketing back-to-back that overlapped by an afternoon. The first one was the Legal Marketing Association P3 conference. P3 standing for Pricing, Project Management, and Practice Innovation. So these subjects, coupled with the subject of the Legal Sales and Service Organization, covered the gamut of what law firms are grappling with and have been grappling with. Everybody looking at how to be more efficient, how to innovate their practice, and innovation is really what's going to separate the leaders from the followers. Satisfaction. How can you be more satisfied? How can your employees be more satisfied? How can lawyers across the firm be satisfied? How can your clients be more satisfied? And how can you do all of this while maintaining and increasing revenue? And it's interesting, in the P3 conference, I attended that, the first conference a few years ago. Actually, this was the third annual. LMA P3 had about 100 people in the first year, and this year it was nearly 400 people. So you can tell how these issues are resonating with people, and everybody across law firms, across the country, across the world, because there were people at both conferences from outside the U.S., are dealing with this and moving through the pipeline. I envision this as we've come a long way from a few years ago, where a lot of firms were all at the start of this pipeline looking through this long tunnel. But firms have moved through. We haven't transformed yet. We still have a ways to go. But this is all really looking at how can you move through the turmoil to transform your firms. My name's Sharon Berman. My company is Berbay Marketing and Public Relations, and we create the visibility and credibility that fuel revenue growth. Okay, first, just a little bit about Legal Sales and Service Organization. It's a membership organization. Its focus is to focus on legal sales, service, and client experience, and you'll see the website as we move through. So one of the main events that they put on is the Raindance Conference, and this year they had their first ever Sales and Service Executive Award, which we were pleased to sponsor. The difference between legal sales and service and LMA, well, I'll give you explain the difference between the conferences. They both have very worthwhile conferences. Legal Marketing Association had their conference in April. I think 1,300 or 1,400 people attended. It was in San Diego. It's going to be in Austin, Texas next year. It ranges, the people who attend range from junior to senior, and so the sessions might cover everything from how to use Twitter to how to incorporate marketing into your law firm succession planning. So it's a range of experience and a range of topics. Very worthwhile. I would encourage attendance there, as I would encourage attendance at LASO, the Sales and Service Organization, which really, the conference it's usually about 100, 120 people. The attendees are all highly experienced, and for the most part, they focus on sales. There's some people who have marketing and sales, business development, it's a range, but the emphasis is really on sales. It's a very unique conference. Okay, let's see. All right, so there were really two themes. If I look at the LASO conference specifically, there were really two themes that came through. The first one is leadership. First, about how management is leading the organization, individual leadership and team leadership, client service teams, practice development teams. The second category here I'd call infrastructure. How do you structure your marketing and business development department? Should marketing be separate from sales? Should one person be in charge of everything? You know, that firms, and we'll talk about some unique structures at firms, but that's really one issue that firms are looking at, no matter what size. And then your sales pipeline, which a pipeline, of course, is part of infrastructure. You know, really just even introducing this concept into a lot of firms and how it's being used as a tool to motivate and encourage and reward sales. All right. Our first speaker was Michael Bremer. Michael is president of the Cumberland Group, and he was very, very modest in his introduction of himself. He specializes in business performance improvement. And I heard through the grapevine that he also was very involved with Motorola's Six Sigma program. So he's highly experienced, and he works with firms in terms of how do they improve what they're doing. So what type of leader do you want to be? And talked about the power of choices. The single largest factor in employee engagement, is how employees, at no matter what level, at how they are led. Across the board, if you look at surveys, only 30% of employees would say that they're actively engaged, highly engaged in what they're doing. And so 70%, there still remains that 70% that we need to figure out how to involve them, how to motivate them, how to encourage them. Okay, he talked about the fact that the choices you make create your character, and that character informs what kind of leader you are going to be. And he also talked about the 10% that in any industry, whether it's the legal industry, whether it's manufacturing, at most, only 10% are going to be the elite firms who innovate, who pull ahead of the pack, and who do things differently. Because everybody else looks at everybody else. We're all looking, and even if a firm does something unusual, we're going to say, oh, yeah, us too, we should do that too. So therefore, everybody moves a step ahead, all doing the same thing. But somebody, it's the 10% that are going to pull ahead of the pack. It's a very long process, and he says it takes about 5 years to really transform your firm to be that kind of firm that is ahead of the game. And no wonder there's only 10%, and I think even 10% is high. We all get distracted, leadership changes. You know, how many firms can really stick to the course for 5 years? And he mentioned the fact that a great leader is really looking at broad growth and is looking at how to elevate performance across the board. Okay, now this is Michael's slide, by the way. I took it from his material. He talked about 4 leverage points you can use to become more effective as a leader. The first thing is to determine what is a win. Is a win bringing in a new client, which is fabulous, or is a win something deeper? Is it, you know, changing society? And he used the example of Apple. And he mentioned this, anyway, I'll get to that in a minute. He talked about the fact that Apple's win is how do we break the mold. That's their why. Why are you doing what you do? And Apple, for instance, is innovative and elite because its goal is the why and of what we do is breaking the mold with everything. And that's similar to what is a win. If you have that, so that's our win, breaking the mold, that's going to motivate and create a different kind of organization than we brought in the next client, which is also fine and good, but it just informs a different kind of behavior. So he was saying change your perspective on what is a win. Think about more deeply what a win can mean, going beyond bringing in the next client or whatever the win is. How do you look at that more deeply, and how can that make you a better leader? The other thing is to focus on others, to let go of control to a certain extent, to be collaborative. Also, he talked several times about good leaders are humble. They practice humility, and also make it visual. He talked about, you know, the Fitbit. He wears a Fitbit and how it motivated him. Looking at the feedback, it's motivated him to go from running 3 or 4 days a week to now 6 or 7 days a week. He talked about how different organizations might use the whiteboards to keep, just sort of see what the progress is, keeping score, keeping track, just making the progress and the goal visible. He also mentioned a gentleman named Simon Sinek, S-I-N as in Nancy, E-K. And Simon Sinek, and if you Google him, you'll find he's done a lot of TED Talks and things like that. He talks about a golden triangle, and this is where this Apple example comes from, that if you take what is a win or your why as the core of your bullseye, the win is we break the mold for Apple, let's say. We want to do in everything we do. The next outermost circle would be the how. How do we do that? We do that through our design, our concepts. That's how we do it. And the what is we're a computer company like everybody else. So if you're operating from the point of we're a law firm like everybody else, then you are a law firm like everybody else. But if you're going into we're breaking the mold, you're a different kind of law firm. So that was really his message, and that really influences what kind of leader you're going to be. Okay. Another session, and by the way, I'm not touching on every session. A lot of sessions had similar topics, so I've condensed material. They were all worthwhile, so if I'm skipping something, it's not that it wasn't worthwhile. It's just trying to get this into a manageable amount of time. Okay, Sylvia Coulter, a principal of Law Vision Group, and Law Vision Group is one of the key members of LASSO, talked about client teams, lead or get out of the way. She first talked about client teams just in general, and we've all participated in these client teams. You know, they're where people aren't prepared when they come. There's no accountability. It's reactive. People aren't confident to challenge anybody. They just sort of fall apart. We've all participated in that. And she really focused in on the role of business development professionals in client teams, and talks about, in terms of low-performing teams, the business development professional is a note taker as opposed to being somebody strategic and proactive. They just basically are taking notes. They don't see their role as a coach or a motivator as part of the team. They don't know what the team's goals are. They don't know what the goals for each of the prospects they might be pursuing are. So they don't really know what the purpose is. And they're reactive versus proactive. You know, taking notes, they'll do what they're told to do, but they're not really being proactive in terms of leading the team, and this is what it's all about. And they focus on reporting on history or work in process versus the potential. So she talked about the fact that business development professionals can be the key in transforming low-performing client teams into higher-performing client teams. And these are the characteristics of high-performance teams. It's the business development professional is knowledgeable about team tactical information, about budgets, about hours, challenges, knows everything about it. They demonstrate leadership. They're the ones who are saying, why don't we try this or let's try that. They're encouraging. They think strategically, and they are doing a lot of thinking, working with the partners or whoever's in charge, working hand in hand. They're anticipating needs. They are creating a sales pipeline, and we're going to be talking a lot more about this, but sales pipeline came across several presentations and was really focused in on as being key. They are patient and persistent, working with the lawyers and the team, and they make team leaders look good. So it was really a very motivating session in terms of what role business development professionals can play in terms of whether it's a client service team, whether it's a practice development team, a marketing team, and how that can really transform what kind of team you had. Okay, our next session, the S word, a sales team panel. And here we had the moderator was David Burkhart from Wyrick Robbins, Hans Hagland from Blank Rome. Blank Rome is a firm of about 550 lawyers, 14 offices. Terry Price was from Bass, Berry & Sims. They are located in Nashville and Washington, D.C. and have about 225 lawyers. And Tucker Ellis, Jonathan Matson from Tucker Ellis. They have 5 offices, 2 in Ohio, 2 in California, and 1 in Colorado. First of all, they talked about the fact that making a joke that you know that you're in legal sales if your title has the words client relationship development, business development, chief marketing officer, every word but sales. And because very few of the sales professionals in legal sales actually had the word sales. It's, as the panel's entitled, the S word. They also made, and this came up several times in several sessions, I was really so glad to hear this, made the distinction between marketing versus business development. Marketing being everything you do to make somebody want to pick up the phone and call one of your lawyers. Marketing is always about generating the lead. It's not about the selling process. Once that prospect has picked up the phone or contacted you, you are selling. That is the sales process. But the marketing, and Jonathan Matson from Tucker Ellis used the word marketing eminence. Marketing eminence, creating the visibility and credibility that fuel revenue growth. That's what we talk about. It's creating that visibility and credibility that gets somebody to pick up the phone so you can sell. They talked about creating a sales culture, that's really one of their key roles, is that this sales culture may have been in some of their firms, and some of the firms did not exist at all when they first came, and how they've had to really bring in sales training or do the sales training themselves, but really expand whatever marketing culture had been there and business development culture into, hey, this is about selling. It's marketing, that's great, but we need to expand that definition and vision and action into sales. And instituting sales pipelines, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But so you have everything organized, accountable, trackable. You're on top of things. It's not loosey-goosey. It's not vague. It's very specific. And measurement systems. Carrie Price from Berbay said, you know what, I measure outcome, I don't measure output. And that was that resonated with everybody. Okay, Berbay has a very interesting structure, sales infrastructure, or marketing and sales infrastructure. Carrie is head of marketing and business development. She formerly was what they call a managing director, and they have several managing directors in the firm. Each practice area has a managing director, and that managing director is not a lawyer, and they are responsible for two things. One is operations, in the practice group operations, everything from pricing, hours, assignments, working very closely with the practice group leaders. And then they're also responsible for business development, being sales. So it's a very unique structure. It seems to be working very well, and now she is in charge of all the managing directors and so handles the marketing and business development. She spent her first few, I don't know if it was months or it was the first year in that position, working on marketing, rebranding, the marketing eminence activities, and now is really focusing on sales. Jonathan Matson talked about the fact that he was brought into Tucker Ellis to really create a business development culture. And I do have to say that all of these people on the panel had sales experience. They had strong sales experience. They may have had marketing also, but really strong professional services selling experience. Jonathan was brought in to create a business development culture, and he positioned himself at the start of the business development pipeline, and he did this by working with the lawyers. When it came to working with a prospect, he said, our marketing group will help you do the research and get all this information together. And he did that because, of course, he wants to make sure his lawyers have what they need, but also because it positions marketing and business development right at the beginning of the pipeline. So very, very strategic move. Let's see. They all talked about their role as educating their lawyers in terms of sales. Some of them do it themselves. Blank Rome has a sales training program. They work on tracking everything. What's the close rate? One interesting thing that Carrie also said was, this has to do with search engine marketing. She said that they have been very successful with search engine marketing, search engine optimization when it came to one practice area. And she really was not a believer. She was very skeptical, but she said, go ahead, and they did it, and it's been very, very successful. It hasn't been as successful in another area, but I do want to give her credit, first of all, for giving it a shot, and also just want to mention that, I mean, I happen to be a big believer in search engine optimization and search engine marketing in terms of legal marketing and sales. And I know there's still a lot of skepticism out there, so it was really glad to hear that it really worked well for them. Okay, let's see. This is very interesting also. Okay, what to look for in a salesperson. Then we have our friendly, your subway guy probably is in legal sales, but he looks friendly, approachable, personable, which you would want in your legal salesperson. They talked about personality being key. Personality, it's hard to quantify, very hard to quantify, but they talked about somebody they felt could deal with a lawyer's personality, who could, you know, in a non-threatening way, guide lawyers in terms of, you know, perhaps you want to try this, perhaps that's not the best way to look at it, and help move the sales process along without being threatening or confrontational. The question was asked, does it have to be a lawyer? It really just depends on the person. In some areas, let's see, Hans from Blank Rome said he doesn't want a lawyer if it's a business practice area, more business oriented. He wants somebody who has more of a business experience, and it was agreed by the panel that a lot of lawyers cannot make cannot transfer to being a salesperson. Industry experience was key, and that was looked for across the board. If you're going after energy, somebody who has experience in that area, whatever it is, that was really highly rated in terms of what they look for. Do not buy a Rolodex, and I've heard this more than once where people say, you know, oh, he has such great contacts, he's going to get us in, where, you know, open all these doors. I rarely hear that being successful, and that across the board said, do not buy the Rolodex. It's not what makes a good salesperson. What's their track record? Do they have a sales track record? All of these people on the panel had extensive sales experience. What is the salesperson's track record? And ego was also in terms of, it can't be somebody who has to be front and center. And somebody used the example of a law firm sending out an email to everybody in the firm saying, congratulations to, you know, the practice development team for bringing in a new client, and that includes Harry, Sally, Joe, whatever. Oh, and by the way, also thanks to John. And John happened to be the salesperson who generated the lead and who also worked with the partners to bring it in. So you can understand that if somebody needs to be front and center, that's not going to fly. So those were the key aspects of what to look for in a salesperson. Okay, also talking about the sales pipeline, we had Christian Berger, Senior Advisor, Business Development Strategy, McGuire Woods, and that basically, again, you don't see the word sales. His role is legal sales. He talked about selling legal services to big clients, and this applies to any client really, big, small, but he talked about the importance of the sales pipeline and said the things that are really important are achievable goals, make your assumptions conservative, and this is really important. You'd have to know what your conversion rate is. How many leads, how many meetings do you have to have? First of all, how many leads do you have to generate in order to just get that one new prospect meeting? Okay, and how many new prospect meetings do you have to have for somebody to become a client? And a lot of firms can't answer these questions in terms of, okay, I need to generate 20 new leads in order to get that one prospect meeting. And this is where the importance of measurement comes in. And in terms of tracking and measuring where your leads are coming from. Now, I know a lot of you on this listening in already do this, and I know that a lot of firms listening in don't do this. But that's why we always hammer away at, you have to capture this information, or else you're not going to know and be knowledgeable in terms of how you're going to put together your sales plan. You need to know, you need to be capturing not just where new business is coming from, but where your leads are coming from. Because that way you know, is it working? Is your search engine marketing working? Is it, because you're, all the seminars you're putting on, because you're doing webinars? That needs to be tracked. Okay, so for those, some of you I know have not seen or aren't familiar with sales pipeline. So I have this example. This did not come from the conference, but I just wanted to show one example in an Excel spreadsheet. You have your prospect name, where it came from, what phase you're in. You know, you presented your proposal, you've had your first meeting, you know, you're negotiating who the responsible party is and what the next step is. And here, this is done different ways, but one way to do it, what's the estimated revenue from that client, from that prospect, if you were to get it? What's your probability? And what's the forecast revenue, the 50% times 150? And some people might say, well, okay, you know, can you really put in forecast revenue because you get the business or you don't? But the theory is that for every 51 probability 50% that you get, you don't get another one at 50%, so it sort of evens out. And the key to this is just making sure that you're really on top of keeping the probabilities current. So this is just one basic example of a sales pipeline. Okay, we also had a session that was called, give me a minute, it was called Success Showcase, Intersection Between Technology and Revenue. And and that was really a technology showcase showing marketing automation being so key today. This is one product called Practice Pipeline, and this is a very, it's a friendly, approachable, graphic way of keeping track. This would be an individual's scorecard, let's say, or where they are. You know, and the red, the different colors mean different things, different where you are in the process and where you are in the timeline. So you see what needs to be done, what your next steps are, and really a very easy to read, easy to use way to keep on top of filling your pipeline. And then the other part of that is a management overview. So management can see how each of the lawyers is doing and has a real quick way and quick read to stay on top of things. So that was one of the technology ideas presented. And I think this really could go a long way in terms of keeping a pipeline full and motivating, keeping that business development culture top of mind. Okay. Carrie Barrett of Accretive Solutions Accretive Solutions provides professional services. She is one of their key sales management people, and she had a very interesting session on 10 things you can do today to impact revenue. These were very clear and to the point. Number one is expand the tide. Basically, further penetration of current clients. Bundle better. Bundle better, she meant looking at your services and how do you look across the matrix? If she was saying, for example, they provide services to companies going through IPOs, and they might do intellectual property, and they might do due diligence, and they might be providing 3 different service lines to companies preparing for an IPO. So they would create, let's say, an IPO package and bundle those together and price it differently perhaps than if it was individual. So anyway, bundle better. Price to the service, if it's rush, if it's more complex, if it's premium for whatever premium pricing, watch the clock. Talked about, we all know this, it's so easy for our time to be eaten away. She was saying be jealous of your time and focus. Her thing was, as a salesperson, are you spending 50 to 60% at least of your time on client outreach? Dig in, meaning dig into your client, get to know really well what the industry issues are, what they care about, what they're facing. So dig into your client, get to know your client, meaning say no quickly to, if it's something, we don't do this, let me find somebody else for you, so you're not spending your time on doing things that don't make sense for you. Expand your ecosystem. This is basically expand your referral base. Prepare, inform, and advise, being proactive with your clients. Drop the anchor, meaning you land the client, start expanding the tide, start going deep, start digging in, getting to know them so that you can prepare, inform, and advise. Analyze what's working and repeat. So very actionable items, a very, I think, motivating session. Okay, and then one of the most anticipated panels each year. This is the second year they've done it, and they call it their Rapid Fire GC panel. They had GC from Cozy, ArcelorMittal, Redbox, and Chicago Cubs. And we've, so GC panels, a lot of the stuff is the same, but there were some interesting points that these GCs said that were very important to them. Okay. They need you to budget. They don't want to hear that you can't budget. It's litigation, and you don't know if you're going to go to trial. They say, tell us what the assumptions are. Give us the parameters, but you have got to give us a budget. We have to give management a budget. Don't give me excuses. Industry expertise was very, very high in terms of what they value. The hourly rates paled in comparison to industry expertise. You have the deep industry expertise. In sales presentations, they said they'd like to hear a lot more about industry expertise in the sales presentations that lawyers do to them. They'd also like to hear have the lawyers quantify their experience any way that they can in these presentations or when they're trying to make a pitch to them. Nominations and rankings really, nobody cared about super lawyers. It wasn't high on their list. Loyalty, this was an interesting subject. Loyalty in terms of the GC from Redbox said, do not tell me what you saw on Netflix last night. Okay, that's my competitor. I don't want to hear what you saw about on Netflix last night. The Chicago Cubs GC said that she used the example that the car she drove when she was in-house was always driven, no pun intended, was driven by who their clients were, meaning, she doesn't want to use the client's products. Don't talk to them about competitor stuff, that sort of thing. With an interesting angle that I haven't really heard before. Entree, how do you get entree to these GCs? Through a friend, there's no, that was, I think it was the Redbox guy who said, listen, try and approach me through a friend. They didn't talk about newsletters. They did talk about that they would go out to their referral sources if they were looking for if they needed some outside counsel, they would go out to referral sources, which is one reason why you need to stay top of mind with all the referral sources. So it might not be that direct pitch, but it's also, if it's through referrals, you got to stay top of mind with those people. Cybersecurity, they said a law firm's cybersecurity is very important to them. So if you're not really pushing that right now or mentioning that, you might want to be, bringing that up as a point of differentiation. Diversity, they said diversity is another very important point. In many ways, they presume it, but it's sort of like if it's presumed, and if I see that you're not focusing on diversity, then that's really a downside, and they all across the board hate when somebody brings in their token ethnic person who has no relationship to why they should be in the meeting, but it's just like, hey, we happen to have this, ethnicity here. If there's bad news, this question came up last year. If the law firm is in the news for any reason and it's bad news, they would like to hear that from their relationship partner. And really what they're looking for is how can how can their outside counsel help move the business forward? So it's interesting because when you hear general counsel panel, you usually think, oh my God, how many times have I heard this? I've heard what new can they say? And that's really, these conferences were really worthwhile last week. The LMA conference, the LASSO conference, extremely worthwhile. I would encourage all of you to put it on your calendar for next year. But at a certain point, what happens? You have to stop. You can only say so much, and then you have to do. And I know that a lot of those of you listening are already doing, and I give you credit for already moving through the pipeline to be able to transform your firms. And I know that if you incorporate some of these concepts and ideas that came across at the conference, that you will accomplish that transformation. So I want to say thank you so much for listening. Please tune in for our next webinar, which is going to be on Thursday, July 16th. Our Senior Account Manager, Megan Braverman, is going to be talking about search engine ranking for dummies. So we hope you can join us for that. Thanks very much.